Despite the Waqf Amendment Bill, status quo will continue for now as the Supreme Court allows the centre a week to get back on key questions flagged by it. Among those questions is one central question. Can Muslims be on Hindu boards? Say it openly. That's what the Supreme Court asked of the centre as it flagged key issues which looked like the Supreme Court may place an interim stay on the legislation. That did not happen. The Solicitor General also assured the court that status quo for now would be maintained till the centre got back with a detailed reply. I'm Barkha, you're with the Mojo story. On the program today, we'll be looking at the debate, the legal and the political debate around the Waqf Amendment Bill, a key legislation passed by the central government, by the Modi government, but being contested by more than 70 petitioners in the Supreme Court. From the hearing in the last 24 hours, the Supreme Court, we know, has flagged three key issues. Among them, whether non-Muslims can be on Waqf boards. That seems to be the big one. But also questions have been raised on stopping Waqf by user and the powers that have been given to the collector when it comes to adjudicating on Waqf properties. For now, the status quo is going to continue. The centre has assured the Supreme Court of that, even as this past week we have seen violence break out in Murshidabad in West Bengal, and that in itself has heightened political tensions between the Trinamool Congress and the BJP. Now, what might the Supreme Court do? Could an interim stay be a possibility? The Supreme Court's choice of three central issues is particularly significant. Let me introduce well-known legal scholar and educationist, our newsmaker on the program today, Faizan Mustafa. Thank you, sir. Pleasure to see you. The Supreme Court seems to have narrowed down on two or three key issues. And the first one is whether non-Muslims in reverse, the Supreme Court raise this issue that can Hindus tomorrow Hindu boards have Muslims on them, and can non-Muslims actually serve on Waqf boards? The Supreme Court seems to have flagged this as a key issue. For now, status quo is continuing. What do you make of the proceedings in the Supreme Court so far?
Barkha, thank you very much for having me. I'm really surprised because I had written it and I had also spoken on this that on the first day when the constitutionality of any law made by the parliament is challenged, the proceedings would last hardly for a minute or two when the court will issue notice to the Union of India. That has not happened. There was substantial arguments made and a defense presented by the Solicitor General yesterday. And then there were questions on the merit of law on some of the provisions. I was really surprised because whatever little I know of law, laws are not stayed like this. In any case, what the court did today, that it did not show the same kind of interest in staying which it was showing yesterday. The government conceded some ground because the government on its own volunteered and promised to the court that during the pendency of this case, they are not going to appoint non-Muslims to the Waqf board. And then Supreme Court again said, well, about the Central Waqf Council, it's fine, but Waqf board nominees are nominated by the state governments. So the Solicitor General said, well, you can say that if a state government nominates non-Muslims, then such a decision would be considered as void and illegal in law. The court has also flagged the issue of Waqf by user, and the court has also somehow, raised the issue of Hindu temples not having non-Hindus. So it looks like a huge success for the petitioners. I really don't want to see too many petitions on any matter in a Supreme Court. Even one well-drafted petition is good enough for Supreme Court to pronounce its judgment. But there was a mad race from political parties, from the religious organizations to file petitions. Those petitions have been filed. As you know, Barkha, my position as a constitutional law teacher is that I am for a diversity. I have spent my life arguing that the diversity of the nation must be reflected in all public institutions. So I had personally welcomed inclusion of non-Muslims in the Waqf boards. Many Muslim clerics and many opposition political leaders have been very, very unhappy with me. Many of them sent me messages and then phoned me that, what are you saying? But I can't be, saying one thing here and another thing when I'm talking of rights of minorities. But
So
in
can you explain why you personally welcome non-Muslims in Waqf boards? Because that is one of the key questions. And in fact, the counter question raised by the Supreme Court was, will tomorrow you allow Muslims to be on Hindu boards?
So Barkha, what I said that diversity is good in decision making. Every community, every group, every civilization has a particular way to solve problems. If all the solutions come on the table, we can take better decisions. And since I have been supporting diversity elsewhere, I can't be saying that Waqf board should not reflect the diversity of a nation. If there is some good Hindu architect, for instance, or administrator, having him on a Waqf board, I believe, will enrich their deliberations. But at the same time, I had said that there is a problem in this proposal, and that is a question which Supreme Court has also flagged. There is a fundamental right under Article 26 that every religious denomination or any section thereof shall have a right to own and manage their religious and charitable properties. So diversity on a principle, as a constitutional law principle, is good. But simultaneously, our constitutional jurisprudence is such that there is a provision in Article 13 of the Constitution which says that any law which contravenes fundamental rights, that law is void to the extent of contravention. Supreme Court has to uphold fundamental rights, and therefore Supreme Court flagged it as an issue that how can you interfere in the right of a religious denomination to manage their own religious and charitable properties. Simultaneously, I had also argued, Barkha, that this was an opportunity for one nation, one law. A government which is so much committed to one nation, one law, and on uniform civil code. On your show, I had said that I am a supporter of a uniform civil code. Again, as a constitutional law teacher, I can't be going against Article 44 of my own constitution. A government which wants uniform civil code, which has implemented uniform civil code in Uttarakhand, which has set up a committee in Gujarat, which has promised it in number of state elections, here was an opportunity for this government. I consider the Waqf law to be a case of a lost opportunity for the government. It could have in one go passed one law for all religious communities in respect of their religious and charitable properties. You will recall, Barkha.
So you're saying there could have been one uniform law on how charitable properties associated with different religions should be managed. It did not only have to be about Waqf separately, and that would have also removed the perception that this is about one community.
Correct. And you will recall that on your show, I had said that since it is a contentious issue, on uniform civil code, bring piecemeal reform. So here was one issue, religious and charitable property. We could have brought one law. Some other time we could have brought law on divorce, law on marriage, law on will, law on inheritance. So they could have made a beginning. By bringing Waqf law, governments resolve and believe in one nation, one law has become questionable.
So you're saying that this now to you looks like they should have done it about all religions and not just about one religion.
Muslims. That's
not
right.
just about Muslims.
That's right.
Now, going back to what's happening in Supreme Court, where the Supreme Court has flagged these three key issues: Waqf by user, the powers of the collector, and whether non-Muslims can be on Waqf boards. What do you think is the central legal questions by which the Supreme Court will resolve this matter?
Supreme Court is not on the question of diversity.
Yes.
It is a policy issue. I said I favor it. Supreme Court is looking at a question of a fundamental right. Article 26 gives right to a religious denomination to own and manage their properties. What government would say that their right is not really curtailed, and mere presence of one or two members is not going to really affect their right to manage properties. What the court is saying that if you look at the provision, it seems that there can be majority of even non-Muslims. And I'm inclined to believe that the government has to assure the court that there will not be majority of non-Muslims. And if it fails, the government may lose this case on this provision, or the court may, in a way, dilute this effect that X clause of this provision is struck down as unconstitutional.
So we could be looking at a scenario, not to double guess the court, but simply going by the proceedings, where the Supreme Court doesn't put a stay on the entire legislation, but can pick up one or two provisions and say this interferes with fundamental rights.
But that is a normal procedure, Barkha, because no law is ever entirely stayed or struck down. This is called doctrine of severability. What the court will try to sever the provisions which are violative of fundamental rights from the ones which are consistent with the fundamental rights, and only those provisions which are in violation of fundamental rights or contrary to Part 3 of the Constitution would be struck down. Only when two provisions are so connected that you cannot sever them, in that case the court strikes down the entire thing. So I don't see about Waqf law, there is absolutely no possibility, I can assure you, that entire law is not going to be struck down.
So basically you believe the law will be upheld, and what we have to see now is which of the provisions of the law the Supreme Court agrees with.
Correct.
Now, from a legal point of view, what is the central question the Supreme Court has to address? Because the government, the Home Minister already said in Parliament that the non-Muslims on the Waqf boards will not be deciding on any religious matters. That is what the government has said. Now, even if there are two non-Muslims and the majority are Muslims, what then is the legal question before the court?
I am inclined to believe, Barkha, that eventually after the arguments, government would be able to convince the court that mere presence of non-Muslims is not going to violate the right of religious denomination to manage their properties. So I don't see that on this point the provision is really going to be struck down unless the court says that you cannot have non-Muslims unless simultaneously in the Hindu temples you get non-Hindus. And this they said yesterday, that are you willing to have non-Hindus on the Hindu temple boards? Again, Barkha, you would be surprised that while Article 25 in defining Hindus includes Jain, Sikhs and Buddhists within the definition of Hindus, yet in the temple boards, a Jain or a Buddhist or a Sikh cannot be there. You have to be only a proper Sanatani Hindu, then only you can be on their board. So even all Hindus within the definition of the Article 25 of the Constitution cannot be on that board. So again, there is a disparity between one nation, one law thing that you are having.
But wouldn't that be a basis for which the Supreme Court could strike down this provision? This particular
I think what the government would say that these are the state laws and we can't do much about it. But you see, that is the whole point. In the whole debate on Waqf, we were told that as if Waqf board is some private body of land grabbers or private bodies of some fanatic, mullahs. This is not a case. Barkha, Waqf board is a state within the meaning of Article 12. It is government. It is an instrumentality of a government. It is a statutory authority. There can be a writ against a Waqf board. All the members of the Waqf board, almost all, are nominated by the government. The chief executive officer of the Waqf board is nominated by the government. The government has the power to supersede a Waqf board if Waqf board is not complying with the directions of the government. In fact, if you compare the religious and charitable properties of other communities with Waqf, I say it without any fear of contradiction that Waqfs are more tightly regulated. And there is a central law on Waqf. There has always been a central law for Waqf. But for the religious and charitable properties of Hindus, you don't have a central law. Tamil Nadu has one law, Karnataka has another law, Bihar has a third law, Telangana and Andhra are having different laws. So, in terms of regulation by law, in terms of supervision of a state, how Waqf board works, how a property becomes Waqf. Survey commissioners are public servants appointed by the government. They make a survey, they operate like a civil code, they look at the rent record, they look at the taxation record, they look at the Waqf deed, etc. Then they make a recommendation to a Waqf board. Waqf board, I told you, is a statutory authority, it is government. Then Waqf board makes a recommendation to the concerned state government. Only when state government publishes a certain property as a Waqf property in the official state gazette, in the Rajpatra, then only a property becomes a Waqf property. All this propaganda that Delhi High Court is a Waqf property and Taj Mahal is a Waqf property, these are some statements made by somebody, but they have not been notified in the official gazette as the Waqf properties.
Yeah. So to that extent, what you're saying is that although, for example, there are many Hindu groups that argue why does the state have control over temple boards, you're saying that when it comes to the management of temple properties, it's state by state, and there is a central law that actually governs Waqf properties. But what now? What happens now? We have seen violence in Bengal, for example. We are seeing a highly politicized, ratcheted up political conversation. What would you urge the community at this, the Muslim community in particular at this point to do as this matter is decided in the Supreme Court?
Barkha, as you know that I don't represent any political or religious organization. I speak as a student of law and as teacher of law. I look at law like this, that a law has been passed. There are some provisions in this law which are good. There are some provisions which are controversial. Since the law has been challenged in the court, we must await the verdict of a court. In a constitutional democracy, you have a right to challenge a law in a court of law. Any kind of violence, anywhere, is absolutely unacceptable. And it is the responsibility of a district magistrate of a concerned district to control the situation. And there have been commissions which have said that if any communal violence is not controlled within 24 hours, that means that the district administration has not done its duties efficiently.
So, when you look at what's happening in Murshidabad or what happened in Murshidabad, what would you say?
No, I'm not an expert to speak on the violence because I'm concerned only with law and with legal questions. So I have not really followed the story very closely. But any violence anywhere is absolutely unacceptable. Once the matter is in the court, we must await the judgment of the court and make whatever arguments you want to make against the law in the court of law or in favor of law. So who is at fault in Murshidabad? I am not really aware. But I am telling you a general principle that if law and order is not restored within 24 hours, that means that the district administration has not done their job well.
Finally, Faizan Saab, it is an onerous responsibility before the Supreme Court. What will be the central constitutional point that the Supreme Court will be concerned with?
As I told you, one is this: non-Muslims on the Waqf board, does it violate Article 26? I am not very sure of even making this argument that Waqf is an essential aspect of Islam, because generally the court does not look favorably on the whole question of essentiality. If somebody doesn't make a Waqf, he still remains a Muslim. And that's why if somebody wants to make a Waqf, you should not put any restriction on that. In fact, I am surprised that the Chief Justice Khanna pointed out this provision that you can make a Waqf only if you are a good practicing Muslim for 5 years as a good provision. In my opinion, it is hugely problematic because it is going to encourage, bigotry. How can you say that I am not a good Muslim just because I am not praying, or I am not keeping fast, or I am not having a beard? If somebody says he's a Muslim, you are in United States right now, they have an assertion test. In any religious matter, if somebody asserts, this is my religion, and this is what I believe, normally the court should believe that. So the moment somebody says, I am a Muslim, it is my property, I want to, burn it, or I want to create a waqf for it, to establish a hospital or a school or a road, no authority on earth has any business to come in the way of exercise of ownership right of any individual. It is the fundamental rule of our jurisprudence. And that's why waqf by user Barkha is problematic. It is my property. You are using my property with my consent. I am not objecting for decades. And therefore, due to your implied consent and my continued uninterrupted use, law says that it shall be deemed that it has become my property. Right. It is again a question of ownership. And then the Babri Masjid judgment, Barkha. At least 20 pages are there on waqf by user. That is what yesterday the Supreme Court said, that if the court has declared that waqf by user is a principle of our jurisprudence, how can through a law you change that provision? And it is in the entire world. Waqf by user is not a question of any one law. It is a rule of evidence. Who is using this property for how long? This is the question of evidence.
Well, it is a critical question before the Supreme Court. Thank you for explaining some of those legal dimensions, Faizan Mustafa. Always a pleasure. We'll call you back once we see how the Supreme Court reacts in the next hearing. Thank you so much. It is status quo for now. The centre has asked for a week's time to return to the court with answers to some of the questions raised by the Supreme Court. Thank you, sir. Take care.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.